Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, President, Founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GSD that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. So I have an incredible guest today. Tom Blair has decades worth of leadership and technology and entrepreneurship experience. He's revolutionized the way businesses operate through AI process automation at IClerk. As a CEO and founder, he's committed to leveraging his expertise in big data and customer relationship management to align his company's vision of streamlining operations for professionals globally. His team's dedicated to innovation and efficiency, which mirrors his own personal commitment for creating impactful, purposeful solutions. At iClerk, his focuses on developing agents, AI agents that automate repetitive tasks, freeing up valuable time for business concentrating growth and the thing they do best, which is innovate. He leverages his experience at Zoetis, where he co-founded the company and utilized data science to enhance his approach to solving complex challenges. His proficiency in database and CRM is instrumental in delivering robust, scalable platforms that empower his clients to achieve new levels of operational excellence. So with that, I'd like to bring Tom Blair on board. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
I feel like Groundhog Day. Hey, Tom, I just have a question for you. So, you're from Minnesota originally.
Yep.
How in the world did you end up in Orange County? Like, did you wake up one day and say, well, you're out by the lake fishing and said, I'm going to make a change in my life, or what happened?
It was a circuitous route. I ended up, it is a 40-year journey. I went to Kansas City, Rochester, New York, Boston, Tokyo, Hong Kong, London, San Francisco to Orange County in the last 5 years. So I always say it's love or money, and most of that was, following work around the earth. And then over the last 5 years, I've at this stage of my life, I got remarried and moved to Orange County. So I think growing up in Minnesota has something to do with the constant quest to find the optimal weather on the planet.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know if you've heard this story, but the summer of 1816, there was an explosion in Mount Tambora, Indonesia, that sent volcanic ash around the planet. Something very interesting happened because a lot of Northern Europeans migrated to the U.S. and they didn't find any food. I don't know if you've heard this story. So the Swedes, Norwegians, etc., came into on the East Coast and there was no food, and they migrated west out to Minnesota because it felt like they were back home and there was a lot of wildlife.
The first time I ever went to Norway, I went to a wedding at an 11th century church, and the graveyard outside had all the names of the kids that I grew up with in the graveyard. So I was like, it felt like home.
Yeah, no, I love it. Actually, Norway's one of my, I like Sweden, but Norway's something special. It just feels like it's like you're inside of a picture, with the words and everything.
Yeah.
So, how did you go from a research engineering at Kodak?
Yeah.
Right. To founding. And by the way, Kodak was like right at the top of the game when you were there.
Yeah. It was like working for Google at the time.
How did those guys go from the top, and ladies go from the top to the bottom? Like, did they not innovate or?
Yeah, it was an impossible call. I've gone over this in my head for so many decades. I remember I presented. So first of all, they invented the digital camera in 1975. I went to work for them in 1985. They paid for my master's degree in semantic image recognition. So I got my degree in, AI in 1991. What was driving all this was I had built an image database that the first application was at the 1992 Olympics in Albertville in France. And at that time, Sports Illustrated was taking about 600 rolls of film per day and then flying them onto the Concorde over to New York, where the editors ultimately would print, I think it was a ratio of 600 rolls done, and they would print 3 pictures. And so this image database, Kodak photo CD that they were producing at the time, would then allow them to see high resolution images and basically double click, transmit things that we take for granted today. And then they could go to print for that. So the next phase of that was they had just purchased a photo stock agents, like a Getty Images type entity that had millions of images. So the quest that they set me upon was, how do you find a picture of a boy in a blue boat from 5 million images? And so that was 40 years ago. And so through my career, that was kind of the quest. I ended up at, I did a lot of distributed database work, but I ended up at Autonomy in Cambridge in the UK, doing semantic image classification and text recognition using Bayesian algorithms. When I moved back to the US, I was on a M&A team, and we bought a company out of Japan called Dejima. One of their customers was SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and that was the basis. They're using it for NLP processing. And so that multi-agent architecture stuck with me over the decades. I eventually, in the late teens, I started an AI weather company that did weather, water, soil, crop growth modeling. That got sold to DTN. And that would do things like run the nation's snow plows and allow farmers to plant and to harvest and to fertilize appropriately. From that, we started an animal health company that, like you said, was sold to Zoetis. All of those were based on ensemble type processing, where you use multiple models for, there's certain characteristics. You're doing a lot of numerical processing and needs to be accurate, a lot of statistical analysis. And so that leads us to what I've built today is IClerk. We've been building it for about 5 years. The original IP work was done 2017 through 2020. First patent was issued for our agents in 2020. And so this has been really a lifetime quest for me that started at Kodak in the 80s. So the original question was, how did Kodak lose it? I remember presenting to the board of directors at Kodak. I remember I was 26 and my boss said, don't talk. And I had to go in front of the board because the software was crap and only I could run it, right? And so I remember it was a big V-shaped table, and they had it was the mid 80s, and they'd only had like 8 or 9 CEOs since 1888. And all the dead presidents were on the wall, and it was a big V-shaped table, and Colby Chandler sat at the end, and he said, Tom, we have one criteria. If it costs a dime to make and $1 to sell and it's addictive, we'll fund it. And that was basically the metaphor for film. Or
a dime to make and $1 to sell, we'll do it. I love that. Yeah, that's great.
And it's addictive, right? And so they funded it. And so they were doing all this, but it was a $26 billion a year company. They had 120,000 products in their SKU. It was everything from pet plastics. They were the largest dairy producer in the US because of the cow bones. They had Homer Formby's furniture polish, Fisher Price toys. They owned everything. And they owned Eastman Chemical. They owned huge pharmaceuticals. Every one of the people on the board were a chemical engineer. There was no way they could have made that call that 20 years from now, we're going to give up our 3-cent film that we sell for $10 and invent an iPhone, because that took 20 more years. And so it was just, there's nothing they could have done. I sat there. They knew what was going on. We had image databases. They had digital photography. But how could you monetize it in the world of silver halide chemical processing? Right? Yeah. So,
wow, amazing. Where is Kodak now? I mean, is Kodak in existence?
More. It is still. They sold off a lot of their IP. There's still. I think it's still a multi, $1 or $2, $3 billion market cap company. They have. I don't know what was salvaged, but
that's amazing. I mean, I remember, the Kodak moments and all this stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, you worked at multiple tech giants like Oracle, SAP, and Trimble. How did your experience there influence your vision for AI-driven automation at iClerk?
The SAP, that was Sybase acquired. SAP acquired Sybase. Oracle was, I don't remember which company got acquired by them. I never worked for Oracle. I never worked for SAP. Trimble was like, that was an 8-year quest. I was running their telematics business. So we had like 600,000 vehicles outfitted with GPS and all the inventory control, and it was a mobile hotspot, and so all the cable, telco, satellite, and wireless systems, all the vehicles we would track and put geofences around. It was, I remember AT&T was spending like $775 million a year on fuel, right? And so if you can save 15% of that across those fleets and optimize things, so all the most of that is standard deterministic processing, but a lot of it, like routing. I remember I ran a group out of Ipswich in the UK. We had all these, quants that were we had purchased a routing algorithm from British Telecom, and we were productizing that and bringing that to other telcos and telco, cable, satellite, wireless. And that is a complex problem, right? It's magical that Amazon can show up at your door like this. Right?
I mean, we did the Click software, right?
It has taken literally 40 years of refinement of those algorithms and the million times of processing capability that's come up in my career, right? So all these ideas have existed, right? It's for, AI agents were coined in 1957. The term AI is 1955. It's all the same thing. If you study AI today, you'll learn about that history. So it's what's old is new, right?
What inspired you? Let me talk about this. What describes some of the typical use cases for IClerk? Because it's interesting with those AI agents and the specific business outcomes that you either have enabled or believe you can enable.
Yeah. Well, what we found our niche in, you can see the big consultancies putting up huge numbers in the Fortune 1000 for consulting. Every professional services organization on the planet sees the writing on the wall, right? They need to do something. The missing element right now is the SMB market, the $10 million to $1 billion markets that they don't have the balance sheet, the capabilities, the human resources, or the knowledge to do it themselves. And it's a existential threat to them. They will go out of business, that at a 4x reasoning inference efficiency increase per year, that's 1,000x by 2030, right? So a $10 reasoning task right now goes to a penny. And so effectively all reasoning goes to zero in the next 5 years. And these businesses are starting to see it. So they struggle with, repetitive document heavy SaaS systems, and they've got HubSpot and they've got spreadsheets. And the initial agents that we deployed into production were to retain staff that didn't want to do the mundane repetitive. It was, for instance, at a venture fund that they were spending about 160 hours per quarter across 4 people to do their LP reporting. So you think about what that task looks like. I have a portfolio. I have 20 or 30 or 40 portcos in that portfolio. And each quarter, I have to go out and track down those founders and then get them to send me their messy balance sheets and their updates, what went well, what didn't go well, their balance, all their information. And then I have to process it through my CRM, and I've got my ownership information in this Excel spreadsheet, and I have to go over here to our master schedule of investment spreadsheet. And then ultimately I need to generate a report per company and cross portfolio. So in that case, they were having a problem with retention. It was costing them about 10% of their OpEx, of their cost of operation. And now it's done in 3 minutes for $1,000 a month, right? Well, and so, and we've got all kinds of examples like that. We automate accounting and financial processes that need to be critical. That we provide things like single click accuracy, so any number that is derived or sourced, you can just click on it and you can see the reasoning and you can see where it came from, right? So nobody trusts an AI. And so what IClerk does is it provides those, you hear it a lot, but it is the fundamental guardrails around the efficiency of it and the cost of it and the accuracy of it and the repeatability of it, right? So
how does IClerk ensure the transparency and security of client data?
So it was built from the ground up exactly for that. So it is, there's two levels of abstraction within a system like this. One is the data layer. So all the data are left in place. We named some of the data sources that these types of systems use. And so those just stay in situ, and you don't bring them in like a data lake and then do business intelligence on it. You basically point at it. The other thing that you need to abstract the reasoning layer, right? People choose the foundation models based on three different things. It's based on cost or performance or jurisdiction, where you are in the world, or what the situation is, what vertical market, for instance, legal versus medical. And so in other domains, these systems affect every application in every sector in every country in the world, just like databases did. Right. And so when you look at it on a global basis like that, you need to have something that's ultimately configurable. You have this rapid advancement of technology. It's literally weekly. And so nobody can keep up with that. So iClerk, you can think of a task with many actions. Each action can be acted upon by a different model, right? And so you have this multi-model ensemble processing system that's optimizing based on the task or the cost or the location where it is. We've got clients that never want to share private data. And so in those cases, we'll only use the LLM for language processing and some reasoning. But even before we send a document to a reasoning engine, we'll anonymize it, right? And then you can reassemble it. We can run without the internet, so you can run a local LLM. So it's the ultimate privacy. You can just have so it's really based on roles, right? You configure these based on proprietary workflows. Everyone is custom. You can do it in 6 weeks. It automates 90% of your work for 10 cents on the dollar, right? The thing about agents is they're atomic units of work, and everyone can get their head around that. You don't need to solve for AI or re-engineer your entire company. You can do it one step at a time. And each of those steps, you have a clear value proposition. It's measurable, and you can see the effect on your organization, right? Because it's 1/10 of the cost of a human, thereabouts. You can have 10 agents for the cost of one staff replacement. And so typically people will start to find 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 more agents because they don't want to do the work. They're already doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not really autonomous agents. They're role-based agents that act just like an employee would according to corporate policy or regulatory guidelines, right? The next generation of autonomous agents will come, but that's not where we are right now. We're really deploying these, labor-saving efficiencies.
So you've seen the evolution of AI firsthand from early days to today, and generative AI, neural networks, quantum computers. How do you really view the future trajectory of AI? And
Yeah.
what do you think is going to happen? What's next, in your opinion?
It's humans are not good at exponentials, right? Think about the two things that happened in my career is the internet, and then Moore's law over 40 years is 1,000,000x in processing power, and now it more than doubled, and so now you're shrinking that down into 20 years or 5 years, and so I've really tried to scope it down into what's attainable over the next 24 months and not try to understand. The thing that sticks in my head is that 2,500 pages of contracts or legal documents is about 1,000,000 tokens. So on O3 today, it's about $10 to process 1,000,000 tokens. And so if that goes to zero, what does that mean for any professional services? It could be environmental reporting by civil engineers or traffic engineering, or I've done animal health and I've done weather, and it's the sectors you wouldn't even dream of. Everyone knows that we're going to do health and education and legal, and finance is the one we're working on now because VCs, private equity, family offices, fund administration, it's all going to change in the next 36 months, right?
Mhm.
Because you can do it for 10 cents on the dollar. It's accurate. You can prove it, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, this gives you superpowers. I remember
Yep.
a year ago, I had a chance to keynote a conference out here in Silicon Valley about digital workers, and I've been working in AI, 30 years for expert systems, maybe a little bit over 30, actually. Yeah, about 34 years. And hate dating myself, but that's just the way it is.
It's my 50th year on a computer, 1975.
Wow. For me, it's 1976, actually.
Yeah.
That was my first
Right.
year. I was
Yeah.
doing basic, and I remember I was playing with Fritz, my computer. If you remember that little, I remember.
I was playing Oregon Trail on a University of Minnesota teletype connected to my school, right? It was the
Oh,
most
I remember that.
awesome thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I sold Commodore 8032 Super Pets, and got it 8050 drives, 8250 drives, Apple IIs, Cs, Apple Ones, all that stuff. I was involved. It's just hard to believe now, but looking at it, over the years, you've had a lot of leadership positions.
Yeah.
What leadership positions guide you as a CEO, especially when navigating these technology-driven businesses in such a highly competitive market?
I've learned, through thousands of phone calls that I'm not an expert in anything, And so what we found the keys to success is matching with these professional services teams that they do this for a living. They're cranking out this work. They live it. And so it's really a partnership where we've got an operating system, an agent operating system that provides all the tools and guardrails that you need to deploy in a matter of weeks, right? And what do they bring? Well, so we bring the data collection, we bring the wrappers, we bring all the generative ability, right? And what they bring is that intellectual property, the workflow itself. And so by providing potentially branded role-based agents, right? So they can slap their brand on it, they can unlock their IP and potentially bring it to, we see this with things like due diligence algorithms, risk algorithms, where private equity or firms have developed their magic sauce for decades. And so how do you unlock that? How do you make that more efficient, right? How do you optimize it?
Mhm.
All of these, it's usually, we look at it from there's an internal optimization that can take place, but then there's an unlocking of the IP that you can repackage and offer it, and it really makes it malleable and understandable. So that's the real opportunity. That's the force multiplier. It's not selling agents one at a time. It's how do you affect entire submarkets, right? Niche industries that have a lot of human touch in it, right?
Can you highlight one major discussion or decision that you've had at iClerk that significantly altered the direction or success of the company?
Yeah, there was a couple. This started as I founded iClerk, and I started doing the initial work in 2017. It was a commodity price discovery engine. People suck at pricing cows. Cows are complex objects. They're skinny cows, grain, fat cows, ethanol, fuel. So it's really the intersection of 5 different complex commodities. So the idea was to build this agent operating system that could operate autonomously and then interact to do derivative commodity or price discovery. So we did. We started to build that, patented it. Went to the Chicago Merc that has all the commodity data, and they're a multi-billion-dollar monopoly for a reason. And so little people like me don't have access to the data. So then I started to look at other public data like equity, crypto, and we can price any asset basically, right? And so the epiphany was to switch it to private data, to look at the professional classes that where the accuracy is critical. It needs to be repeatable. It needs to be traceable. People like teachers or venture analysts or CPAs or paralegals or doctors, and we've got there's 6 or 7 sectors that we've sold agents into. They all have the same characteristics, right? We handle the data, we abstract out all the reasoning capabilities and allow you always to be state of the art without worrying about it. We can automate all the generative. It makes everything much easier for them. And so my company really has no employees. We've been operating for 5 years. Everyone's a contractor. We operate in 10 countries. We operate using these AI tools, right? It really is the next generation of how do you build and manage a company like this, right? And it's fascinating. I'm learning every day at this point. So
no, that's great. Well, we're coming to the top of the show.
yeah.
Closing thoughts and how do people get a hold of you?
I am at tom@iclerk.ai, and I'm always open and willing to. I mentioned that we really work through partners, and so people have a lot of questions about how these agents are going to affect their businesses, and so it really is. We try to make it as low risk and low pressure. We typically do things for free in 6 weeks, and it's very consultative. So give me a call. Like I said, I'm at tom@iclerk.ai. You can check us out. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thanks to all of you for joining one more time. GSD presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back to get with you again soon for another.
Get shit done.
Get shit done. I'll talk to you in a minute. Stay on, Tom. Thank you.